The Trump campaign is pleading with supporters to donate to the president's so-called Election Defense Fund. The campaign has sent at least 190 emails under the premise of seeking money for these legal efforts, none of which are likely to overturn any election result. However, our Nicole Scango reports 60% of contributions under $5,000 is being sent to the president's Save America Leadership PAC, with other portions being sent to the Republican National Committee. Experts tell CBS News the money could be used for travel, rallies, and consulting fees to the president's family or even himself. For more on campaign fundraising, I want to turn to Ann Ravel in Los Gatos, California. She's a former chair of the Federal Election Commission appointed by President Obama. She works as Digital Deception Project Director for MapLight, a nonprofit revealing and tracking the influence of money in American politics. And she was recently a Democratic candidate for California's 15th State Senate District. Ann, welcome. Great to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
So the fine print of these donations does note the donations are being used for other things. But based on your experience at the FEC, is it legal for the president to raise money under the pretenses of a, quote, election defense fund and then use that money elsewhere, such as paying off the campaign's debt?
Right. The term for raising money improperly is called a scam PAC, essentially. And that seems to be what is happening here. But unfortunately, the FEC doesn't really enforce it. And there were some laws, bills introduced in Congress by Katie Porter and others. It was a bipartisan bill, but it hasn't passed, to deal with those people who are in some ways defrauding the donors by telling them that the money is going to be used for one purpose and it's actually used for something else.
So let's dive into some of the language being... sorry, go ahead.
No, unfortunately, it is, and in this case, I think you could argue really strongly that it's a fraud, but there's not been any effective way of enforcing that.
So can we dive into some of the language being used? What does a so-called Leadership Political Action Committee actually do, and does it differ from any other type of PAC?
It does, in the sense that these were set up in 1978, and the whole purpose was for candidates to be able to have a committee that is totally separate from their own political committees. And they were intended to be used to advance their abilities by making friends, essentially, and giving money to other candidates. But the reality of what has happened with those PACs is that most of the money has not gone to other candidates. And in many cases, it goes to things. In fact, there was a recent filing with the FEC about the inordinate amount of money that goes for personal uses of the candidates. And personal use of campaign money for candidates is illegal.
So these committees have essentially just created a lot of gray area. Is that accurate?
Well, they certainly are not allowed to go for the political purposes of the candidate. So while the person is a candidate or in office, they are not allowed to utilize that money for their purposes. But they can use it for other broader purposes, and many of them honestly use it for things like going to golf courses and fancy restaurants and the like. It's a really poorly defined committee, and it's quite problematic.
So the FEC, Anne, has not had a quorum for much of the past year and a half, essentially halting election law enforcement. How does this impact what candidates have been able to do in campaigning?
Mhm. Well, even when I was at the FEC, which did have a quorum and we could meet, it was always divided, unfortunately, and everything that is required in order to enforce the law requires a four-person vote, and there are 6 members of the commission, and they are supposed to be bipartisan. Now, with no quorum, people understand that they can violate the law with impunity, and there is not going to be any ability for the commission to meet even to look at complaints. And there have been several complaints, in particular of possible money laundering on behalf of President Trump and various other really serious complaints about failure to follow the law. And it's always been something that a lot of candidates have known anyway because of the divisions, the partisan divisions on the FEC, but this makes it even worse. They can't even look at it. They cannot even look at the ability to decide, for example, whether leadership PACs should have more careful regulation. So that's a really serious problem.
So what needs to be done then to give the FEC some more teeth?
Well, the problem, and let me give you a little background, because there are now 3 members and they cannot meet. However, the commission was always intended to be 3, well, no more than 3 of one political party. And the hope was that there would be bipartisanship. What has happened is actually President Trump has recently nominated, a little at a time, 3 more commissioners. But that would, if they were actually all of them confirmed by the Senate, which there's supposed to be a hearing next week, it would mean there were 3 Republicans, 1 Democrat, and 2 independents, which is totally outside the norm of how nominations have been made. And really what needs to happen, because a lot of these nominees are people who are so partisan and have already been very outspoken that they don't believe in the purposes of the FEC, which include full disclosure of all campaign finance transactions. I am very concerned about whether anything will ever be able to happen, because they can deadlock easily, and then that means that nothing can be enforced. So what needs to happen, in my opinion, is that there should be, and hopefully the president could make this recommendation and Congress, the Senate might go along with it, that all of the commissioners should change. And what should happen is there should be a blue ribbon commission that only recommends for appointment people who believe in the law, who are balanced and not so highly partisan and political. And that is really what was intended to begin with the FEC,
Right.
but it hasn't been the case for a while.
It's always important to have someone watching the money in politics. All right. Well, former FEC Commissioner Anne Ravel, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.